Peshmerge or Peshmerge is the term used by Kurds to refer to armed Kurdish fighters, literally meaning those who confront death. The Peshmerga forces of Kurdistan have been in existence since the advent of the Kurdish independence movement in the early 1920s, following the collapse of the Ottoman and Qajar empires which had jointly ruled over the area. Peshmerga forces include women in their ranks. Many Kurds will say that all Kurds willing to fight for their rights are Peshmerga. The term remains in contemporary usage, sometimes written as Pêşmerge in Anglophone media. The Peshmerge has proven to be an effective army, providing security to all minorities. During the U.S. invasion of Iraq, the Peshmerge was directly responsible for the capture of Saddam Hussein. They also captured Osama Bin Laden's messenger in 2004, which led to the death of the al-Qaeda chief. The term Peshmerge is also the official name of the armed forces of the Kurdistan regional government in the autonomous Kurdistan region. History: the term Peshmerge was first officially introduced during the establishment of the Mayabad Republic, a self-declared Kurdish state that lasted from 1946 to 1947. The term was used as the official name of the Republic's army. The army consisted of a number of former militias that united together under the command of Kurdish leaders, Mustafa Barzani and Qazi Muhammad. After the fall of the Republic, Peshmerge regrouped as rebel organizations that would fight the Iran and Iraq governments for the next several decades. Through much of the late 20th century, Peshmerge often came into conflict with the Iraqi forces, using guerrilla warfare tactics against them. Many of these Peshmerge were led by Mustafa Barzani and Mustafa Nawai of the Kurdistan Democratic Party, while others were under the command of the Patriotic Union of Kurdistan led by Jalal Talabani and Khosrat Reza Ali. After Mustafa Barzani's death, his son Masoud Barzani took his position. Most of the Peshmerga's efforts were to keep a region under the specific party's control and to fight off any incursions by the Iraqi Republican Guard. Following the First Persian Gulf War, Iraqi Kurdistan fell into a state of civil war between the two major Kurdish parties, the KDP and the PUK, and their Peshmerge forces were used to fight each other. Across the border in Iranian Kurdistan, the Kurdistan Democratic Party of Iran branded its fighters as Peshmerge and restarted its armed struggle against successive regimes in Iran. The Komela Party, a leftist group in Iranian Kurdistan, would also begin an armed conflict against Iran using its own fighters, also branded as Peshmerge. Roots: Kurdish forces in World War I. During World War I, Kurds served as irregular and regular units in the Ottoman army. Kurds made up a majority of the 9th Army and supplied enough troops for many frontier units and 135 squadrons of reserve cavalry. These forces, with their experience and knowledge of the terrain, were contributory in fighting the threats to the Eastern Ottoman Empire. Sheikh Mahmud Barzanji revolt. Although both the Turks and the British used Kurdish tribes to instigate cross-border conflicts, local Saiqs recruited Kurds to revolt against the regional powers. The first of these Kurdish call to arms occurred in British-controlled southern Kurdistan in May 1919. Shortly before being appointed governor of Sulaymaniyah, Sheikh Mahmud Barzanji ordered the arrest of all British political and military officials in the region. After seizing control of the region, Barzanji raised a military force from his Kurdish tribal followers in Iran and proclaimed himself a Euro-OE ruler of all of Kurdistan. Tribal fighters from both Iran and Iraq quickly allied themselves with Sheikh Mahmud as he became more successful in opposing British rule. According to McDowell, the Sheikh or Euro unregistered trademark S forces are Euro-OE largely Barzanji tenantry and tribesmen, the Hamavand under Karam Fatah Beg, and disaffected sections of the Jaf, Jubairi, Sheikh Bizaini and Shuan Trebisa Euro. The popularity and numbers of Sheikh Mahmud Euro unregistered trademark S troops only increased after their ambush of a British military column. Among Mahmud Euro unregistered trademark S many supporters and troop leaders was 16-year-old Mustafa Barzani, the future leader of the Kurdish nationalist cause and commander of Peshmerge forces in Kurdish Iraq. Barzani and his men, following the orders of Barzani tribal Shakir Ahmad Barzani, traversed the Payad Valley on their way to join Sheikh Mahmud Barzanji. Despite being ambushed numerous times along the way, Barzani and his men reached Sheikh Mahmud unregistered trademark location, albeit too late to aid in the revolt. The Barzani fighters were only a part of the Sheikh unregistered trademark 500-person force. As the British became aware of the Sheikh unregistered trademark's growing political and military power, they were forced to respond militarily. 2 British brigades were deployed to defeat Sheikh Mahmud unregistered trademark's fighters at Darbandi Bazian near Sulaymaniyah in June 1919. Sheikh Mahmud was eventually arrested and exiled to India in 1921. At the root of the rebellion, Sheikh Mahmud unregistered trademark's leadership appealed to both Kurdish nationalist and religious feelings. Although he knew he could not directly defeat the British, Sheikh Mahmud hoped to seek recognition of Kurdish nationalism by advocating a Free United Kurdistan unregistered trademark. Using his authority as a religious leader, Sheikh Mahmud called for a jihad against the British in 1919 and thus acquired the support of many Kurds indifferent to the nationalist struggle. Although the intensity of their struggle was motivated by religion, Kurdish peasantry seized the idea of a Euro-OE national and political liberty for al-Euro and strove for a Euro-OE improvement in their social standing. Despite opposition by other regional tribes, possibly fearful of the Sheikh unregistered trademark's growing power, Sheikh Mahmud unregistered trademark's fighters continued to oppose British rule after the Sheikh unregistered trademark's arrest. Although no longer organised under one leader, this intertribal force was a Euro-OE actively anti-British engaging in hit-and-run attacks, killing British military officers, and participating in another Euro left the Turkish ranks to join the Kurdish army. In response to the rebellion, the Turkish government, realizing the strength of Azadi, quickly arrested many of the organization Euro unregistered trademark's leaders, both. In creating a battle plan, Said and the other prominent remaining Azadi leadership established 5 major fronts to be commanded by regional sheikhs. These sheikh leaders were assisted by former Ahmadiyya cavalry officers who provided military structure to the rebellion. After organization, unit responsibility was divided among 9 areas. The overall headquarters of Sadr Euro unregistered trademark's military force was located in Ergridan and protected by a force of 2,000 men. During the onset of the revolt, Sadr Euro unregistered trademark's fighters, facing nearly 25,000 Turkish troops, gained control of a vilayet near Diyarbakir. Besides seizing Turkish land and acquiring additional munitions, early victories instilled confidence in the rebellion and garnered further Kurdish support. Throughout the conflict, Sadr Euro unregistered trademark's fighters used both conventional military tactics, including multi-front assaults and attempts at urban seizure, and unconventional warfare, including guerrilla tactics. An example of the conventional military organization was evident in the assault on Diyarbakir, where reports saw a Euro 03 columns of 5,000 strong, under the personal command of Sheikh Sadr Euro. The establishment of conventional higher levels of Kurdish military command may also be assumed as documents conditions also improved for Mullah Mustafa Barzani as he was eventually granted the privileges of a leader in exile. Throughout his years in the USSR, Barzani was able to broadcast via Soviet radio and attended courses in language and politics. Although many sources claim Barzani was given the rank of general in the Soviet army, Masoud Barzani denies that this occurred. Possibly most important, however, was Barzani Euro unregistered trademark's ability to correspond with Kurdish exiles throughout the world, including Jalal Talabani and Ismet Sherif Vanli. Meanwhile, the successful coup d'état copyright tat of Brigadier Abd al-Karim Qasim and his followers in Iraq in July 1958 opened a new chapter in Iraqi-Kurdish relations. Shortly after taking power, Qasim pardoned Sheikh Ahmad Barzani and allowed Mullah Mustafa, his followers, and his Peshmerge to return to Iraq. The Barzani exile in the Soviet Union ended after 12 years, and upon their return, the Peshmerge would once again play a prominent role in Iraqi regional politics. The Peshmerge in modern Iraq, Barzani's return to Iraq/prelude to war, First Kurdish Iraqi War. In September 1961, Kurdish leader Mustafa Barzani openly revolted against Baghdad's authority. He started with 600 followers, but by spring 1962 had 5,000 full-time guerrillas and another 5 to 15,000 who could be called to assist for short periods of time. When he attacked in autumn 1961 he caught Iraqi government forces, principally the 2nd Division, unprepared. Qasim ordered a counterattack, and the 2nd Division was able to reverse most of the Kurdish gains before Barzani's forces were compelled to withdraw into the mountains during the winter of 1961-62. The Second Kurdish Iraqi War. Secret negotiations between Barzani and Saddam Hussein led to the March Manifesto. The agreement included a pledge from the Kurds to stop their rebellion, and in exchange the regime would allow the establishment of a Kurdish autonomous region in areas where the Kurds were a majority. The agreement was to be implemented within 4 years. However, during those 4 years the regime encouraged the Arabization of the oil-rich Kurdish areas. After decreasing the percentage of Kurds in the north for 4 years, the regime demanded the implementation of the manifesto. The Kurds weren't willing to implement it. After the ultimatum extended by the Ba'ath regime expired, the manifesto became a law on March 11, 1974. Clashes between the rebels and the Iraqi security forces erupted immediately. The fighting cost the lives of 10,000 Iraqi soldiers. The Iraqi army was unable to crush the rebellion because of Iran's continual assistance to the rebels. Tehran even deployed 2 divisions of the Iranian army inside Iraq in January 1975. Saddam Hussein, having committed to confrontation with the Kurds, was determined not to lose the fight. In late 1974 he began negotiations with the Iranian Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. An agreement was reached and signed by the sides during an OPEC summit in Algiers. The agreement guaranteed that Iran would stop assisting the Kurdish rebels. In exchange Iraq agreed to demarcate the joint border with Iran according to the Constantinople Protocol of 1913. In the 1913 protocol the borderline in the Shatt al-Arab was in the middle of the waterway, and not as was previously decided in 1937 between the countries. In the 1937 understanding Iraq's territorial water extended to most of the Shatt. The Shah stopped the Iranian support to the rebels, withdrew his forces and sealed the border on April 1. The Iraqi army was able to crush the Peshmerge rebellion until the end of March. Many leaders of the Kurds, including Mustafa Barzani, fled to Iran and others to Turkey. Creation of the PUK. The political bureau of the KDP, led by Ibrahim Ahmed and his son-in-law Jalal Talabani, broke off from the KDP in 1966. In 1975, the Politburo joined with other groups to form the PUK. PUK quickly becoming the second biggest party in northern Iraq, building its own force of Peshmerga. The PUK and the KDP developed an intense rivalry that would even lead to war between the two factions. The Iran-Iraq War. During the Iran-Iraq War the Peshmerga rebels sided with Iran against Iraq. The Peshmerga's support to Iran was an important factor in Iran's early success on the northern front and led to several successful Iranian military offensives, but despite their gains the Iranians were unable to take control of any cities or towns of significance. The Iraqi military responded to the Peshmerga rebels by launching various military campaigns against them, and ultimately employed the use of chemical weaponry which led to military success against the Peshmerga. However, this claimed the lives of almost 100,000 Kurds. As a result of the victory against the Peshmerga, the Iraqi military was able to recapture several towns including the oil-rich Minoon Islands. The Iraqi military received support from the People's Mujahideen of Iran, an Iranian rebel organization, and tried to invade Khuzestan as well as attack the center of Iran. However, both of these campaigns failed with only small gains made. Iraq and Iran entered into a ceasefire at that stage and ended the war. The Iranians pulled out of northern Iraq and Iran stopped supporting the Kurds in Iraq. Resistance to the Iraqi government continued for a few more months until the Peshmerga rebel forces were overthrown. Peshmerga during Operation Desert Storm. In the wake of the First Persian Gulf War, various considerations led the United States to establish two no-fly zones in Iraq. One zone was in southern Iraq, where the Hussein regime had viciously persecuted the Shiite Arabs. The other zone was in the Kurdish territory in northern Iraq. The Baghdad government was forbidden to operate any aircraft in either of these zones, a prescription enforced by United States and United Kingdom military assets in the region. Unable to use air power in the north, and with its conventional capabilities having been all but demolished during Desert Storm, Baghdad had little choice but to sit by and witness the rebirth of the Kurdish self-governing region. The 1991 uprisings, 1991 to 1995, the Kurdish Civil War. The civil war among the Peshmergas of the PUK and the KDP held up the military development of the Peshmerge as the attention was no longer on outside threats. 1998 to 2003, after the 1998 Euro-Washington Agreement fighting between the KDP and the PUK Peshmerge came to an end. As active PUK Peshmerge put down their weapons, elder Peshmerge veterans began filling more political PUK roles. With the KDP increasingly led by Barzani family members, the political tension between the Kurdish parties remained. The emergence of strict, militant Islamic groups such as the Islamic Movement of Kurdistan in northern Iraq had by then already been an additional source of fighting and political tension for some time. The international prominence of al-Qaeda following the 11 September 2001 attacks on the U.S. led to the Qaeda-brokered creation of Ansar al-Islam, which further exacerbated sectarian violence. Although sporadic fighting continued with the PKK, the PUK Peshmerga faced its largest threat from Ansar al-Islam, which was also supported by the Ba'athist government. Led by Mullah, a Kurd of strict Islamic faith, Ansar al-Islam was composed of over 500 guerrilla fighters, many of whom fled Afghanistan after the U.S. Operation Enduring Freedom. Although they had faced traditional military opposition from the Iraqis and mountain-based guerrilla tactics during inter-Kurdish fighting, the PUK Peshmerga had difficulty countering the fanatical assault of Ansar al-Islam. The foreign fighters used suicide attacks, assassinations, mines, bombs, and swords and machetes to not only kill the Peshmerga but to desecrate their bodies. Whereas Ansar al-Islam allegedly received support from Iran, Saudi Arabia, and Iraq, the PUK Peshmerga had only the KDP forces as allies. Both parties were steadfast in their displeasure about the Ansar al-Islam presence. PUK commander Anwar Dalani, for example, asserted there is no room for terrorism in Iraqi Kurdistan. In May Barzani claimed Peshmerga forces did not need assistance to defeat the unwelcome militants. Despite Kurdish solidarity, U.S. preparations to oust Iraqi President Saddam Hussein brought welcome reinforcements to the conflict. Peshmerga during Operation Iraqi Freedom, the Peshmerga linked up with the CIA's Special Activities Division and the U.S. military's 10th Special Forces Group and prepared the battle space for conventional U.S. military forces throughout Iraq. The first step was evicting the Ansar al-Islam from their enclave around the village of Baira. This battle happened prior to the invasion in February 2003 and was carried out with officers from SAD and the U.S. Army's 10th Special Forces Group. Most Ansar al-Islam fighters were killed during this operation, but some escaped to Iran and later regrouped in Iraq as the Ansar al-Sunna. U.S. and Peshmerga spokesmen also claimed to have uncovered a chemical weapons facility at Sargat, the only facility of its type discovered in the Iraq War, which could not have been unnoticed by the government of Saddam Hussein. In addition, this team led the Peshmerga against Saddam's forces in the north. Their efforts kept the 5th Corps of Saddam's army in place to defend against the Kurds rather than move to contest the coalition force coming from the south. The efforts of the SAD paramilitary officers and 10th Special Forces Group with the Kurds likely saved hundreds if not thousands of lives of the coalition servicemen and women during and after the invasion. Peshmerga in the new Iraq, as an ally of the U.S.-led coalition, Peshmerga forces fought side by side with American troops in the 2003 Iraq War in Iraqi Kurdistan. Since that time the Peshmerga have assumed full responsibility for the security of the Kurdish areas of northern Iraq. In late 2004, when Arab Iraqi police and ING units in the city of Mosul collapsed in the face of an insurgent uprising, Kurdish Peshmerga battalions, who had recently been converted into ING forces, led the counterattack alongside U.S. military units. To this day, there are a number of Kurdish battalions of former Peshmerge in the Iraqi army serving in northern Iraq. These units are mostly part of the reformed 2nd Division, stationed in Mosul. In early 2005 it was speculated by Newsweek magazine that Peshmerge forces would be trained by the U.S. to take on Sunni rebels in Iraq. It was estimated that in 2005 there were 180,000 Peshmerge fighters in Iraqi Kurdistan, the article estimating their number to be 270,000 in total. A recent CBS News report places their number at 375,000. In 2008 many Peshmerge soldiers were put into new formations under the Interior Ministry, one of which are the Zeravani, whom are loyal to the Kurdistan Democratic Party. Back in 2008, the Zeravani was a force of 8,000 soldiers, but have grown in numbers and now operate 7 bases inside Iraqi Kurdistan. One of the bases is a dedicated airbase for training on ultralight fixed-wing aircraft. The Zeravani forces are led by Brigadier General Aziz Waisi Bani. The Peshmerge were an active partner in the American-led coalition in Iraq. Many Peshmerge are fluent in Arabic, in contrast to foreign coalition troops, and they therefore played an important role in the Sunni triangle of central Iraq. On the strategic level, the Peshmergas are ready to fight a guerrilla war of any invasion of Iraqi Kurdistan. In 2012 the Kurdish leadership put in effect a program to unify the Kurdish forces of PUK and KDP, both of which operated as separate armies inside the region before the unification. The unification program plans on having a total size of 18 brigades, which will be finalized by mid-2014. The Peshmerge is organizing its own special operations force which will incorporate many of the Cobra battalions. The Cobra forces are elite infantry units inside Peshmerge. The Cobra forces can be found in many factions inside Peshmerge, including the Presidential Brigade and Intelligence Battalion. Many military experts also speculate that the EC-120BS and the MD-530F, which the KRG is getting, might be used as helicopter support for the SOF Brigade in the future. The new helicopters are officially destined for the Interior Police Forces. The Peshmerge have traditionally had a problem with funding, mainly due to their large size. The Peshmerge forces had no live training on their heavy weapons up until 2011 due to lack of ammunition. The problem was tackled after it was put on the media spotlight. Now all heavy weapon formations have at least 320 hours of live fire training and taken part in 6 large military exercises. The Kurdish leadership will also be cutting the size of Peshmerge to pave the way for a faster modernization of the Kurdish forces. Peshmerge in Iraqi Kurdistan said they had taken control of the city of Kirkuk and provided logistical assistance to Iraqi government troops during the 2014 northern Iraq offensive by Sunni militants. Current equipment of the Peshmerge: unlike the other militias, the Peshmerge were not prohibited by the transitional government. The Kurdish army has been formed out of the Peshmerge. They are usually armed with AKMs, RPKs and DSHKs. During the American-led invasion, the Peshmerge captured the rest of the arms of the Iraqi forces, consisting of more than 2,000 armored vehicles and an unknown number of artillery pieces. Small arms, anti-tank weaponry, man-portable air defense system, vehicles, armored vehicles, logistics and utility vehicles, artillery, mortar, anti-aircraft gun, helicopters. See also. Jash, references. Further reading: Chapman, Dennis P., Lieutenant Colonel USA, Security Forces of the Kurdistan Regional Government, Costa Mesa, California, Mazda Publishers, 2011. ISSN 0026-3141, reviewed by Michael M. Gunter in Middle East Affairs, Volume 65, No. 3, Summer 2011. External links: media related to Kurdish Peshmerga at Wikimedia Commons.